Good evening, Monday, that day of the week. Well, when I'm here, but also where we have the rest of the week to get through. How are we all? I can't see you on Facebook coming up. Usually I can, but today I can't for some reason. So I'm just going to say hello to you. I think the man with the plan is trying to change that now, but it isn't an issue, babe, if you can't do it, honestly. But he can, of course he can, because he's a technical genius, as opposed to me. Although I can bake cakes, so not technically a genius at it with respect, but nonetheless. Hi everyone, lovely to see you. I'll get on with the questions in a second. I'll just make sure that everyone else is arriving. Like I always say at the beginning, if there is somebody who's got a pressing issue and wants to remain anonymous, just get in contact with me on Facebook in the private messages or Insta. If you're brave and you just want to get a bit of support, just pop your questions on the feed. YouTube, Twitter, on Facebook, and let everybody get involved. My community is a lovely community. I might look a bit bog-eyed today, as my mother would say, but I got up very early today because I did GB News because Eamon was on, Eamon Holmes, and obviously I used to be around him at this morning. So I thought, well, I will go because he's in Manchester doing it from Manchester, so I went down. But I forgot what it was like to get up very early. Also, my taxi driver was wearing a mask, and I have really bad problems if people don't show me their face. If I can't see their lips moving, I really struggle. So I did one of those journeys, and I'm sure you've all done them, and don't deny it, you all have done them, where the entire trip, he spoke to me, and he had quite a strong accent as well. Haven't got a clue what he said. Whole way. I just went, yeah, a lot. Yeah, and said things like this. It's mad, isn't it? Yeah, crazy. Don't know what he, don't know. Could have agreed to anything during that conversation. Very nice man, just couldn't understand any of it. And it can't just be me who is struggling with people who still wear masks, and he had to because there's some really ridiculous rule still playing out in his company. But it kind of made me giggle that, one, I've lost my capacity to engage in social experiences because obviously we've all changed our lives in the past few years regarding how much we go out because of the fact that jobs are very much at home for a lot of us. But also, I've still not made it past that capacity of being able to go, I just don't understand you. I'm really sorry, I'm struggling because I can't see your face. Somehow I felt it was better to root for the option of just guessing the conversation and just hoping there'd be a punt in there that I was getting the right thing. He's probably thinking, why does she keep saying that's crazy when I'm telling her about something really important in my life, or I'm just talking about the traffic. Right, let's get on with tonight. I just want to say before I start as well, I know that G is watching, and I know that Katie wants you to know that you're very strong and this time will pass and she's there for you. So I've given a shout out to you. Hi. Just remember, life is full of suffering, guys. I don't say that lightly. It is. But learning to suffer in a way that still allows us joy is a really powerful thing that we need to all do. And I think that these days, it's really integral to our humanness and to our experience of what life can be to accept that it is fundamentally a struggle a lot. And it doesn't help when there is a mythical, materialistic, media portrayed ideal and standard of what life is meant to be. It's one of those journeys that inevitably has a lot of sadness and a lot of beauty and a lot of joy and a lot of fear and a lot of all these other things, and ultimately it ends on this plane. And the sooner that we kind of acknowledge that and are able to say, well, to some degree, that fleeting experience of being present and being well and being able to have our faculties, that fleeting presence of it needs to find a way to be celebrated, even when we're dealing with things like insurmountable loss and grief of people that we adore and mental instability at times. All of those things, that's part of what life is about. And I think that sometimes we underestimate the reality of that. And if we accept that and bring that into focus and say to ourselves, you know what, this striving for happiness is kind of a straw man to some degree. It really is, because happiness is a byproduct of what we are experiencing and what we are doing and our purpose and our reason. And that byproduct isn't there presently all the time. Sometimes it's just about noticing that the neutrality of life is the best place. So to be neutral, to just be able to go through the motions and not really think about the past and the future and not really worry about the now or what's next. Those key moments of neutrality are really powerfully beautiful when you allow yourself to just see that that means that the status quo is okay. It's not incredible. It's not astounding. It's not like you see in the movies, but it's still perfectly formed, if that makes sense. That turned into a bit of a lecture. Wasn't meant to, but nonetheless. My anxiety is a 9. And what can I do to help CPTSD? It's so difficult. So your anxiety is a 9. I'm going to assume you're using a scale of up to 10. So you're telling me that it's incredibly bad at the moment. And it's great that you're using that measuring tool, because arguably it allows you to recognize when the dial is down and when you're feeling like you're coping better. So even though CPTSD, or complex post-traumatic stress disorder, for those of you who may be tuning in and not know what that is, one of the things that is important to differentiate between PTSD and CPTSD is basically the fact that with CPTSD, as opposed to, let's say there being, this is how I'd say it, by the way, simply, all attitudes are allowed. People with differing opinions are also allowed. But I would argue this, that usually with PTSD, there is, let's say, an origin that's kind of identified. So, veteran friend of mine got blown up by the IRA. So his PTSD was very much based there. And that was what his experience of PTSD was, an origin of a moment that when you work in traumatization and detraumatization, you can kind of utilize that. But then he actually went through some really serious other things within his career, and then it became CPTSD, which is like a compounding. So now it isn't an origin, it becomes more of an experience that's more difficult at times to reduce some of those traumatic feelings, because you're not just dealing with one experience, you're dealing with many accumulative experiences of it. That's what I'd say anyway. And anxiety, definitely, when you think about the fact that anxiety comes from stress hormones, you know, if you're walking around on high alert all the time because you're afraid of an attack, and there's a big survival mechanism in the self, and the survival mechanism says, I need to do everything in my power to keep you safe. So that's what our reactions to trauma and fear are about. Even though they feel traumatic to experience, they're really just informing us of a requirement to be safe. And unfortunately, they got stuck on a volume really high and inappropriate for what you need day to day. But when it decided to turn the volume up, it probably made sense. Jesus, I never want anything like this tragedy to befall me again. Therefore, I must always consider the world this unsafe. When you look at it like that, PTSD, CPTSD, high anxiety, all the things that go in there, actually, that comes from a place of, shall we say, informed experience and even sensible thought in the moment. But as opposed to it being left in the moment and then gradually diminishing from that crescendo to a lower note, it kind of keeps going at the same level. And that causes us issues that intermingle both on an anxiety level and, of course, repeated experiences, triggers when we're dealing with PTSD and CPTSD. So I just wanted to explain that. So you can't kind of separate the two in the fact that one is going to play into the other. An anxiety of 9 is going to make you super coiled and super afraid and super aware of that survival mechanism, and therefore it's going to impact and make it more likely that you're having some of the more negative experiences of CPTSD, nightmares, hot flushes, flashbacks, freaking out at noises, feeling really angry, crying, all the things that can go hand in hand with that, and panic, so on and so forth. So therefore, what can you do about that? Well, the first is that you can do a lot to relax the anxiety. Anxiety is an information experience emotionally for you to know that you are being tapped on the shoulder, that there is something to be afraid of. You have to acknowledge, what is it that I'm afraid of? What's the naming of that? Like, literally, everyone should name their anxiety. They should name the fear. They should name the worry, because when you can do that, you can then do a worst case scenario exploration of that, and that's really powerful. So when I suffered from anxiety many years ago, and it was many years ago because I worked really hard on having what I consider systems that are effective for me. My worst case scenario was that my dad was going to die. That was my worst case scenario many years ago because he was my saviour. He was the person who soothed me. He would be the person who turned up and gave me a hug when I was a single mum and I was struggling. And he would be the one who would say, it's going to be all right. And so my fear would be he will be gone at some point. And the thing was, facing that is always something that's terrifying because it's a reality that's going to come for anybody when you think about loss. But it was in naming that and being able to explore that and saying, okay, losing dad, and the other was losing my home and my job and being on the streets. That was where I would catastrophize to. And a lot of you will experience that. You'll catastrophize with it. You will go through a moment in your life and you will expand it to such an exaggeration that it will be like the most horrific outcome. But the only way that you can really confront how rational or irrational those situations are is to really work with them. So, you know, when I started to do the catastrophization about my job, it would be like, well, my evidence is I've always got a job, so I'll get a job again. And you start working at these kind of solutions that can be really helpful to reduce some of that actual feeling. If it's you were horribly abused in a relationship or you had a terrible childhood and you were abused, again, whilst you can name that and be like, well, I never want to be abused again. It's like, well, okay, so you're a grown-up. So that's not going to happen because you're going to put these strategies in place and you have this acknowledgement of what you don't want anymore. So your worst case fear has been named and you've got a solution. It's not going to occur. So you confront those fears. And even with the ones that unfortunately are going to come true, such as the way I lost my dad and the fact that I did lose my dad, my worst fear came true because I'd done that work, which was a pragmatic attitude towards life and death in the end, which was about acknowledging that why fear something that's inevitable? And also, why not embrace the moment of what you have, which is rich and full of the thing that you fear losing because you have the joy of experiencing it in the moment. That was an incredibly joyful thing to hold on to. And the loss does not get made any easier, but it certainly means that the worth of the experience was fulfilled. So that's what I'd suggest on one level. You do a worst case analysis and you really, any of you with anxiety should do this anyway. Any of you who have these issues around catastrophizing or being afraid, do that work. Then the other side of it is the stalwarts of dealing with anxiety. Get out and exercise. People say it all the time, but it actually works. So do it. You don't have to do loads. If all you can do is a 15-minute walk, knock yourself out, that'll do. It's better than nothing. Make sure that you're eating a nutritious and healthy diet. Get rid of the processed shit. Get rid of it. It's not doing you any good. It won't be helpful. It won't make your system efficient. It certainly won't make you feel healthy and vital. It will likely add to your anxiety. Cut out alcohol or recreational drugs. Don't know whether you're taking them, but if you are, knock them on the head. They'll give you a rebound effect that will make you feel worse. It's the same with some medications as well. So always explore what you're on medically. Then on top of that, things like meditation. I'm the meditate as opposed to medicate model. I don't mean that medication isn't brilliant. It is, it's amazing for a lot of people, but I don't think it's necessary for anywhere near the amount of people who are on medication. So meditation is really good. Practicing mindfulness, formal, such as yoga or body scan or meditation, or informal, gardening, walk with nature, leave technology at home. Bring yourself to the present with it. 5 things I can see, 4 things I can hear, 3 things I can taste, 2 things I can smell, 1 thing I can touch. Do things like that. Anchoring. Carry around something of meaning with you in your pocket. Ideally wrap it in something that smells of something that's familiar and makes you feel at peace. And if you feel that you're starting to lose that sense of rationality because you're feeling the panic build, smell it, sit down, take a breath. They're all excellent for anxiety. And of course, on top of that, some people need extra help. Some people need to go and speak to somebody about it. Some people need to call a friend and just let it go. Some people need extra help. But for the most part, we can do a lot to manage our anxiety index. And with your CPTSD joined into that, look, you should definitely be getting some kind of trauma therapy. Ideally something like schemotherapy or EMDR. They would be good therapists to try to engage in. Hope that's been helpful. I hope that's been helpful for those of you who struggle with anxiety, because Lord knows we talk a lot about mental health, a lot about mental health, full stop, but I don't think we often talk about what's really going on and why we feel this way, and also the practicalities of that. And I think at the moment we need to rethink a lot of the way that people are living, because if all we ever do is what we've always done, then all we're going to get is what we've always got. And right now there is a system that is a little bit broken out there, and there's a lot that we can do to make it better for ourselves within that system. The other thing that I'd say that I've probably missed out on, where it comes down to things like dealing with anxiety and any kind of mental health issue, community. Try and get involved with things of meaning, create a purpose for yourself, push yourself, push yourself, push yourself. Because in pushing the self, you remind yourself of the vitality of the self. And also really be aware that, at the end of the day, these times pass, because sometimes we don't allow ourselves to see that there's a transition and that this isn't how it has to be forever. How can I stop about potential things that probably will never happen, Emma? I think I've probably just covered that. But again, the potential things that never happen, that's what we call catastrophizing. So catastrophizing is, great example of this. You go into the office, your manager looks at you, and when they say hi, doesn't seem as enthusiastic as normal. And from that incident, you go, right, well, my boss definitely doesn't like me. And actually, I've seen what happens when my boss doesn't like people. They get sacked. And now I think that my boss is going to go out of their way to ensure that everything that I do is noticed as negative. And probably within 3 weeks, I'll be dragged into HR and I'll definitely be sacked. I won't get any benefits because I've been in a job less than 2 years. I'm definitely not going to be able to make my rent, which means I'm going to definitely lose my apartment. And oh my God, my partner is not going to be into the fact that I just have no opportunities anymore. So they're going to end the relationship with me. And I'll probably turn to drugs to survive, and then I'll be on the streets and my life will be over. That's catastrophizing. And as much as I use that as a sarcastic example, it's a real example. Literally, that's what a lot of people do. They get this feeling and then they make the feeling amplified into something bigger and bigger and bigger, and eventually it's lost any form of reality, but it feels so real. So what we want to do in circumstances like that is we do a thought stopping exercise. So when you start having that worst case scenario, you go, okay, I'm feeling this cycle occur, because what I was just talking about there is you could do a reframe exercise. And within reframing, you can literally argue with yourself. So take the example, my boss looked at me strangely and I start to go on that cycle. You create a repeated exercise of arguing with the self, and you're like, that makes no sense whatsoever. They're probably having a really bad day. That makes no sense whatsoever. Your work hasn't slipped in any way, shape or form. That makes no sense whatsoever. I wouldn't let that happen. I'd go to HR, no one's allowed to bully me out of my job. That is a cognition break. It's a way of breaking the cognitive flow and to interrupt that pattern. So that's what you can do. Also, you can do distraction. By the way, that would be classically known as disputation. So if you want to look it up for more information, disputation would be the word that you'd look it up for psychologically. But the other one is distraction. And distraction is simple because even though you feel like, well, why would something so simple be effective? And it's almost like when people give you exercises like this, there's almost this sense of like, are you patronizing me? Because why would that work? And I completely get that, because there's nothing I hate more. My God, there are some examples that I won't give, but I watch some people and I'm like, do you think you are talking to a 4-year-old? And if they are talking to a 4-year-old, it's definitely appropriate, but I don't think they were trying to speak to a 4-year-old. I genuinely think they're trying to speak to adults and adult teenagers, But nonetheless, the point is that distraction is actually really effective because it trains the brain to go on a different route. And distraction is just simply, oh, I'm feeling myself cycling. And then you just grab something like a mug and you pick it up and you'll be like, think of 100 things I could do with this. And then that's what you do. You think of 100 things, and the whole premise is you're taking yourself away from that big cycle of disaster and you're keying it into a distractive exercise that can make you feel like you're just getting a bit of a reprieve, and then you take a breath and go back to what you were doing. They're all things that are really helpful. Also, classic things with any kind of anxiety response and terrible thinking response, just think about what you can do when you go to bed, because bed is the witching hour, isn't it? Like 2-3 o'clock in the morning, which I was actually having a conversation with my kids about this today, because one of my children has problems at times sleeping, and I get to sleep but I wake up. I'm one of those people. And he was saying to me, Mum, I've read this thing, don't know where he got this, apparently it was a fact, one of those facts. And he said, when you wake up like 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning, is it because somebody's watching you? No, obviously not. But clearly he's seen that on TikTok or something, who knew? But I was like, no, but it's a really interesting talking point, because actually the belief is a long time ago, humans, when we didn't have light in the way that we do these days, electricity and so on and so forth, we had 2 sleep rhythms. So we would go to bed when it went dark, then we would wake up early morning, work for a few hours or go foraging for a few hours, and we go back to sleep. So we have these systems where often people wake up about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. So knowing that, that's a way of reducing some of the anxiety that people feel when they do wake up in the middle of the night. It's like, oh, actually, this is just being human. That's all it is. And then the other thing is, before you go to sleep, if you are struggling with sleep, just put your phone down for a few hours. Don't watch TV, definitely read. And also things like a hot bath 2 hours before bed, getting it really hot, allow yourself to really feel that heat, and stay in it for 20-30 minutes and then get out and let yourself naturally cool down. It's about 2 hours that's required, and that cooling system relaxes the body and really helps with sleep. So try that as well. I'm getting told off because he's getting really angry because this will be scratching. I just think that he wants to come into the shot in a 1970s dad's vest. That's what I think. I mean, he's trying to make out like it's the microphone and all that, but we all know he just literally moved it to the other lapel. Like, that definitely isn't gonna, I don't think anyone is, I don't think Shaz is like sitting there going, or Gemma is like, you know what, I can't watch this anymore. She's making a scratchy nose with her hair. I digress, guys, I digress. My stepdad's brother died suddenly, and my stepdad isn't dealing with the grief very well. Apart from drinking heavily, how can me and Mum help him? The thing about grief is, it can be so overwhelmingly traumatic in the moment that some people want to anaesthetize it, switch it off. And as much as alcohol is not a great strategy to do so, in the initial stages, a lot of people will reach for that because it genuinely feels like a level of escapism. The capacity to tolerate grief is different from person to person. When I went through my traumatic loss of my dad, I specifically gave up alcohol for a year because I decided that if I started to drink in those early moments, I would never stop. It was a very conscious feeling that I would ultimately never be able to stop taking alcohol as a coping strategy because I felt like I wanted to drown, if that makes sense. For other people, for a temporary experience, they will reach for things that are really bad for them, but they just make the feeling a little bit more bearable. That said, what we don't want is your stepdad becoming an alcoholic, a dependent, because that's just going to add even more weight and pain to the scenario, and it's also going to mean it's very difficult for you and your mum. So first off, you need to connect with him over what he needs to happen. When you feel like the world has ended, and losing a brother is really difficult. You know, a brother is somebody who's meant to be with you till the end. You know, you look at your sisters and your brothers and you're like, okay, how many years between us? Okay, cool. That's probably going to ultimately mean that we're going to be around for a long time. We'll be there when stuff happens and when shit happens in our family and when things start to fall apart. And often as well, during midlife, you don't necessarily spend as much quality time with your siblings, not because you don't want to, because life gets busy and then you imagine they've got time to do this in the future. And so sometimes there are these regrets that you haven't ultimately been able to spend the quality time you would have had you known, with hindsight, 20/20 vision, that your time with that person was going to be limited. So then you have all of this critical experience of the grief process and a sense of guilt and a sense of mortality of your own. You know, you're seeing a reflection. Well, this is my brother, could this be me? These are all really big existential questions that can cause a crisis in the self. So I think first off, like, it depends how long this has been. You know, if this hasn't been too long, then instead of fearing where he is, get in the space. Be like, we know why you're drinking. We know that this is a reflection and reaction of pain. And we understand that that makes it unmanageable for you right now. And that's why you're using. However, it's not necessarily going to be the best fit on this grief journey. And we want you to feel completely supported. So what can we do? What is it that we can do to make this burden a little bit more to bear? Because the problem with grief is it feels deeply isolating and alienating. It doesn't matter if you're all going through it in the same family. Every individual feels it uniquely. And that means that even though everyone's experiencing this synchronicity, and ideally it would mean that we could just reach in and be like, I know where you are, you know where I am. No one feels like that in grief. You each have a personal relationship and a personal loss within that relationship. And it can feel so enormous and unique to you. So bring him to a place where you actually acknowledge what he needs by asking him what they are. It could be that he says things like, I don't want to be here anymore. And that's okay, because people are allowed to express those feelings. It's very normal in grief. He's probably not telling you how scared he is. He's probably not expressing to you that he doesn't want to do this right now. Because when we think about saying those things to people that we love, we think about scaring them, and we feel that that's going to add to their pain, or we feel that if we say it, they're going to call us selfish. And there are all these kind of myths that people carry around with grief. So it's far better to just be like, we've noticed that you're in pain and we see that your coping mechanism is alcohol. And whilst we don't want to remove your strategies, we also want you to know that maybe there are some good strategies that we can work on together where you don't feel so alone and where you do feel that your needs will get met and where we can come together as a family. What I'd say as well on a hope level is that no one ever believes that they're going to smile again. No one ever believes they're going to laugh again. Certainly no one ever feels that they're going to be able to get through a day where they don't have that depth of loss. And ultimately, the vast majority of us, we all reach that point where we can do all those things that I've just said. And it doesn't mean that you betray the person that you've given up as far as not being able to see them in your world anymore, that they've gone from that experience. You don't betray them. They're always present. So just know that this will probably pass for them as well. But lots of support. And of course, if drinking does become a problem, then come back. Because there's loads of things that people can do with dependency, like AA, for example, and getting help from your practitioners that are available in the healthcare system. There's things that can be done. But right now, I think it's more like get down on that level with him and be like, this is tough. This is really tough. It's not unique. Hey, you know, it's the weirdest thing about humans. We all feel so different and distinct often, but the thing about grief is it's coming for all of us, or we're all going through it, or we've all been through it, or we're all waiting to go through it. So it's not unique. And the worst thing is about that most people don't understand true grief until it's slapped you in the face, and then you're like, now it makes sense why that person was drinking. Now it makes sense why that person was shouting. Now it makes sense why that person kept not turning up for work. Now it makes sense that that person got into those awful situations that they put themselves in. And suddenly it's like, yeah, that resonates now. So again, you're going to try to help him escape some of that by just being there. And you are present. You're asking that question now because you are present. You clearly care a great deal about him. He's very lucky. Any tips on how to help control intrusive thoughts? So I'm a big believer in ERP. You can look that up. So basically, ERP therapy tells us that the only way to deal with intrusive thoughts that's effective, but very difficult, don't get me wrong. And for people who don't know what intrusive thoughts are, I'm not going to give examples of intrusive thoughts just because I know that if I do, your brain will probably just take the intrusive thought and then beat yourself up with it, and you'll just create a new loop of intrusive thoughts that I've given you with my examples. So intrusive thoughts are really horrible thoughts that people have on the OCD spectrum that They are things that would literally be the most appalling thing that person could ever think of anyone doing, and they'll imagine that they're telling themselves to do that. So it's this double whammy. They have this horrific thought that literally is as far away from an action that they would ever carry out as you could imagine, but then they'll beat themselves up because they'll think, well, I had the thought, so does that actually mean that I want to? Does that actually mean that that's what I think? And you see, that's really powerfully painful for people, because literally it's the absolute opposite extreme of what that individual would do. But it feels, because it's present in their mind, that they've consciously thought about creating this, right? And therefore they are somehow guilty for that thought. So it's very complex to live within that headspace dealing with it. However, when you literally go through the motions every single day of doing everything that you were always going to do, and you let them just be present without judgment, that is a very effective way of allowing them to dissipate eventually. Now, it won't go away straight away. It's very much about going through the motions of life. It's like having that schedule, having that routine, doing everything that you would ordinarily do. Like if you go to the gym, when you go to work, all of those things, you just do them, and those thoughts are going to be there. But instead of allowing yourself to get caught on the loop and fixating and focusing on them, you're just like, yeah, you're there. You can keep doing your worst. I'm just going to keep going through my day. I'm just going to trust that in the end, your brain's going to get to a point where it's just ingrained itself with the fact that this is just part of the process of being you, and then it just learns to just quieten itself down and disappear. And that is really, really helpful. So I would strongly look up ERP therapy. I think it's really, really helpful to explore. The other thing I would say is, I don't know whether you've ever looked on OCD UK, and obviously you could have intrusive thoughts that aren't just OCD, but because intrusive thoughts can be explored with certain, as I said, resources that cover it, OCD UK's got some amazing resources. It would be well worth going and having a look on there. They've got loads of printable things for family members, advice for family members, and of course loads of information for individuals struggling with intrusive thoughts and all the other paradigm issues within that. So have a look, it's really good. I usually get on well with my employers, so when it comes to leaving, I feel guilty. How do I deal with the guilt? You need to reframe it. It's not guilt, it's a relationship. That's good. You don't want to be somebody who's like, I've worked here, I'm leaving you. Now I've taken the bits that I like from this job and gained that valuable experience and had relationships with you. You are nothing to me, be gone. That would be awful. That'd be a terrible state of affairs. Like, what you feel is because you're an empathic human being. You are compassionate. You build relationships of meaning. And the thing about human beings is we're tribe creatures, right? We become social tribe creatures, become colleague tribe creatures. That means that our natural state and makeup, it's why so many of us are just like struggling in life, full stop, because we don't have a tribe, you know? We don't spend time with groups of great people because we live in freaking boxes and don't talk to one another. You know, we do the absolute worst for our mental health in that respect. But when it comes down to work, it reflects a level of tribe. So you build alliances, you hang out, you invest in those people, you tell people your secrets, you share your confidential experiences, you talk about your fears, and you build these survival mechanics, really, because back when we were living together in said tribes, as I was noting, we were all resources, so we were useful to each other, and part of that was exploiting one another's resources positively, and part of it was gaining a foundation of safety because there were more of us than an individual, for example. And then when you use that and it comes from a very real place, just because you're getting paid for it doesn't mean that any of those feelings weren't really authentic. And we always have like a slight boundary and barrier, because a lot of us will go into a job thinking, this isn't my dream, I'm going to go to another place in the future. Therefore, you kind of always maintain a little bit of a boundary. But the rest of it feels really connected. And now you're extricating yourself from your colleague family, from your employer's family, and you're moving on. Like we do when we go to uni, or we leave home, or we go off and have kids and live in a different part of the country. You feel guilt because people have intrinsic meaning and worth to you. That's good. Don't beat yourself up about it. Be like, yeah, I feel guilty about leaving these people. They paid me. I felt happy. I wanted to stay for this period of time, and now I've got to let them know that they're not good enough for me anymore. And I don't mean that they're not good enough as people, but they're not good enough as a solution for my life in my career. And it feels awkward and weird because we feel like we're betraying them. But that comes from a really good place in you. So don't let go of that. Just be like, use it and say, I feel really sad that I'm leaving. I feel bad that I'm leaving because you've had great meaning to me and I'm really grateful. Thank you. That's what you do. No employer ever will react badly to somebody saying that. Every employer has known people come and go. Every employer has been the person who's come and gone. We know that space. But there is nothing like a colleague coming and saying, this was a great experience, thank you. I will take all that I've learned and all that you've given me and I will move on, and you will be a part of that moving on, and my success will be a part of who you've been here. People are like, yeah, that's gratitude. So you turn your guilt into gratitude is what I'd say. I'm struggling with my daughter going to uni. I can already, before I even read the rest of your question, empathise on the basis that my boys haven't gone to university, but the idea of them leaving my home for anything more than a day or a week is deeply traumatic. So just saying, sister, I'm with you. She isn't contacting me and it feels like a death. Oh. I understand she's young, but I've asked her to contact me. Maybe she just wants to do her own thing. It's not even that, I would hazard a guess. I'm not saying this as an absolute fact. I do not know your daughter. I do not know your situation. This is me interpreting possibilities. However, I would hazard this guess. And the fact that you're in touch with me saying you miss your daughter massively, you love her desperately, and you just wanted to call you, right? That's just so human, so normal. That's because you are a really great parent. Like, wow, she is connected to your soul and to your heart, and her happiness is inextricably connected to you, right? That's how you feel. So your grief is present and powerful because you know she is your baby and now she is absent from your life in this moment. But happy, well-adjusted, secure, confident kids, they are so selfish a lot of the time. You have equipped them with a few really powerful lessons. One, that life is for living, go out and spread your wings and show people what you're made of. Two, I am your safe space. You can treat me terribly and bring your washing home 6 months of the year and I will do it for free, and I will feed you up and feed you nice food, and I will give you extra money when you need it. You have taught her that and she knows it, right? You are her secure foundation. You are her taken for granted. To be taken for granted as a parent feels painful, but I tell you what, wow, it means you are such an anchor. You are so safe that they don't even think about your feelings because they don't need to. You're always going to be there. They're just going to be completely egocentric for a bit and not realize how powerfully important they are to you, because they just know that when they need you, they're going to pick up the phone and they're going to ring and you'll be there. Or when they need some help, you're going to be in the car driving there. And when they come home in the holidays and say hi, give you a hug, and then just go up to the room like it's just no big deal. It's because you were an awesome mum and an awesome dad. That's the biggest gift. You'll get it down the line. She'll realise down the line. She'll have a crisis, or she'll get married and have kids and realise what a help you are. All those things come back. But right now, she's just full of living likely. That's probably the biggest explanation. And I mean, you know, give it a few weeks, maybe some more months, and then just coax her into the occasional call, and then maybe call her as well. Don't feel like you're not allowed to do that. But just don't feel that this is a rejection. It's not. It's a celebration of how great you've been. To be somebody's safe space means that they underestimate just how important your needs are, because you've just spent a lifetime looking after their needs, and you'll always be that person, and that's a powerful gift. Seriously, trust me on that. Trust me on that. It doesn't ease your pain, it doesn't ease your grief, but believe me, if you weren't there, if something took you away, all of that confidence and strength that she's demonstrating as she's at uni, it would just dissipate because her anchor would have been lost. So do not underestimate who you are. And like I said, maybe meet her in different ways, in different territory. Maybe be like, I'm coming for a weekend. I'll take you to Pizza Hut. Get your friends to come too. I'll buy you a margarita. I don't know, whatever it is that will kind of manipulate her in that respect. But the truth is, don't despair. And remember that they come back 6 months of every year. So in the end, she will be home. And even though this is a really bad way of putting it, because it's awful how the economy is right now, I hate it. I hate the fact that we have just had the piss royally taken out of us and we're all going to pay for it. It also means that the likelihood is that she's going to be in your life and home for much longer than you would even envisage right now. So just keep that in mind. 2 of them on food, okay. Really struggling to change my relationship with food. Ever since the first lockdown, I can't watch telly in the evening without some chocolate or sweets. And I really need to lose some weight and get fitter again. So I don't try clothes on without wanting to cry. I just can't seem to stop, and it's making me so miserable. I'm walking more now that I'm back in the office, but it's not enough. Hi Emma, any advice for how to control my emotional eating? Binge eating is more controlled now, but I still overeat knowingly, making poor choices with food. It's like I'm possessed in that moment and then immediately regret it. I have no willpower and it's really affecting all aspects of my life. Because of my self-image, how do I hit the pause button in that moment? So both of those are kind of similar. Obviously, binge eating disorder is a classification. So whilst I'm going to group these together, please understand that I do completely connect. My master's was on eating disorders. I'm a big obsessive when it comes down to eating, etc. But binge eating would be somebody who literally has the disease, so to speak, a disorder where they just eat as self-punishment, as self-hate, as self-harm. But overeating, let's bring it down to overeating for a moment. Willpower is choice. And again, I think we do a lot of damage in our society by thinking about the fact that it's possible to tell people there is a thing where people have no willpower. You do have it, right? It's like me going, that's a phone, I'm going to pick it up. That's what I'm doing. I'm making a choice. If I have a chocolate bar and I'm making a choice, my choice is I'm going to eat the chocolate bar. Equally, I can choose not to eat the chocolate bar. There is nobody that is then forcing your hand. It is a conscious decision to eat the chocolate bar, right? It's a conscious decision. Now, comfort eating is not comfort eating. It's self-harm. Simple as that. There's nothing wrong, by the way, to anybody listening right now. You sit down in the evening and you enjoy a chocolate bar, you enjoy a piece of cake, whatever it is, and you're happy with that and you're healthy. You're not overweight badly, you keep fit, you look after your body. Look, at the end of the day, I do be real in everything I talk to you guys about. At the end of the day, there is a healthy quotient body-wise, right? So as long as you're in that healthy quotient, then if you want chocolate or if you want cake or if you want crisps or whatever it is that people eat, fine, completely fine. Because you're eating a balanced diet and that's a little treat. If you are overweight or you are in a situation where you're using this as self-punishment, that is a choice because you want to beat yourself up. So it's not comfort eating. Sitting and watching TV and having a chocolate bar when you feel terrible about it and it makes you want to cry when you try on clothes, does not comfort eating. The question is, what is going on in your psyche that makes you feel that you deserve to not be happy about who you are? What are the voices in your head telling you, speaking to you? Because a lot of times what will happen is somebody will be like, I'll feel great, I'm just going to go and eat that chocolate bar, and you'll kind of enjoy it in the moment, and then you'll just have horrible negative voices just being horrible about the way that you are and who you are. And then that's harmful, that's really harmful. So there are a few different things. Look, I'm not going to be able to answer it in one go, obviously, because if I could do that in like 10 minutes, I don't know, be a billionaire controlling the world. That's what they seem to do when they get an opportunity, isn't it? Just be up there in a castle going, do that. Actually, it wouldn't be like that. If it was me controlling the world, like everyone would be eating, everyone would be okay financially, and everybody would be a lot kinder. But they don't let people like me control the world. Like, probably because I'm not very good at maths for a start. I'm just throwing it out there. But genuinely, when it comes down to eating things like chocolate, if we're doing a program where we're working in intervention with people, my job is to teach you that no food is good food or bad food. It's just food and it's fuel, and it should be something that you put in your body to get the best out of your body. When you eat a lot of chocolate and sugar and fat, your brain lights up like it's on cocaine, literally. So people think they're greedy when they eat chocolate. People think they're greedy when they eat like big pizzas. And I've worked with so many morbidly obese people, and morbidly obese is so big that you may die. That's what it means. The word morbidly obese means you are so overweight that there is a chance that you might die early. And we have a life-limiting condition we need to deal with, right? No one is doing that on purpose, and no one is doing that because they're greedy. These assumptions that people make are just incorrect. But if what you eat has a physiological response where your brain sets almost on fire in the areas where we see addiction, then you are pumping yourself with a substance that is really bad for you, because you're not able on one level to control it because you're giving your brain something that it's going to crave more of. And secondly, the other thing is that it leaves you nutritionally starving. So one of the things that I've always done with people who come to me about eating is, before we even get past the big problems, the trigger foods and all of those things, it's like we need to see what you're putting in your body full stop, because chances are you'll be eating things that leave you hungry. So you can eat a massive pizza and a big piece of chocolate cake and 2 chocolate bars. You are still going to be hungry not long afterwards. Why? Because your body is looking for the nutrients that's lacking massively. So the first thing that you want to do is to start looking at restoring your nutritional capacity health-wise. So what vitamins do you need? What are you deficient in? Then what can you eat and drink that are going to answer that, so that before you even think about the things that you're trying to make up for when you're kind of hungry and just feeling sad and tired and you're picking the chocolate balls up, what have you put in your body that kind of creates a foundation? So green smoothies, veggie smoothies, things like that, they are good. I know they don't taste as nice as a Mars bar. I appreciate that. But I promise you, if you're having like spinach and broccoli and all of celery and apple with it, and sweeten it up with some pineapple and all of these things, and then you kind of drink that, the foundation has been created. Your body's not nutritionally starving anymore. So it's not looking for just food. It's not looking to be fed because it's got what it needs. And then when you've got that sorted, you're like, okay, what do I intuitively require? And if that is, I'm feeling really sad, or I'm feeling lonely, or I'm feeling bored, or I'm feeling frustrated, or I'm feeling angry, and the answer is put on the box set and get a big bar of Galaxy. Galaxy has become the antidote, just for that short period of time, to these very difficult emotions that you're not processing. My job is to help you understand that you will never meet your emotional needs with anything food orientated. You can't do it. It's an emotional requirement. And actually, I don't need you to fill that gap either. I need you to explore and process. So if you think about the amygdala, which is the area of the brain which is instinct orientated. Now, we've grown and developed a huge amount since the amygdala was deeply effective in removing us from situations of harm or making us procreate or filling our needs with food and drink, because that's what it would do, that area of the brain. That area still exists. It still feels, but very rudimentary emotions, right? So it can't have those higher consciousness feelings of, I feel lonely, for example. So let's take that. I feel lonely. Well, the amygdala goes, oh, I don't know what lonely feels like, but I know that it kind of feels like something empty, right? So the amygdala goes, empty, that means I'm hungry. What do we need to do? I can solve that. Eat that chocolate bar. So it feels something emotional, doesn't know how to process it, and so responds by, I'll eat the chocolate bar. And then you've got the feedback from the brain because it's on fire now. It's like it's just taking cocaine, and that feeds the cycle. Whereas if you go, actually, you know what? This is emotional hunger. This is emotional hunger. I need to satiate the emotional hunger. What is it that I need to do? What is the emotional prompt that's being served right now? And sitting with that can be really painful. And believe me, I know this space very, very well. But sitting with that feeling of, what am I actually running from? What is it that I'm trying to swallow down? I'm going to sit with that. Journal it. Type it down. Sit quietly. Listen. When you're informed about what the feeling is, meet it. Actually, it's because I feel sad. Right, well, you need soothing. You don't need filling. You might need to go and have a hot bath and reflect on what's been causing that. I feel lonely. You're being taught connection. You're not being taught connection with a chocolate bar. You're being taught connection. I need to fill my life with more people. If I'm bored, we need to think about activity. These are all prompts that you're answering with the chocolate bar, so to speak. But it's not because you're greedy. It's not because you're lazy. It's not because you're failing. It's that you're not meeting those needs. So that's how I'd approach it. I'm a big, big lover of the area of eating because, man, we've overcomplicated it. We've overcomplicated it a lot. And when you bring it down to what I've just said, it should give you some really clear pillars of what to work on. And even though at the end of the day, I know that everybody makes choices about the foods that they eat. Personally, like, you would never see me sit down and eat things like that, not because I don't see that they're probably enjoyable. I just don't see that there's very much point in them when there are other things that can be put in the body that are like the best petrol possible, right? And once you do that, you switch yourself off from that processed stuff. And again, you know, processed food does not have to be, non-processed food does not have to be expensive, by the way. My God, it really doesn't. Like, honestly, chickpeas, kidney beans, things like that. Start filling your body with these kind of things, because the other stuff is, when it comes down to eating, one of the things that I think is really problematic is that a lot of people are hungry, like, firstly because they don't eat the right amount of food, because they're either nutritionally starving and looking for other things, so they're eating too much of the wrong stuff. But when you actually eat really good food, non-processed food, you can eat a lot. Honestly, you can eat a lot. And you can eat a lot and feel really full and satisfied. Never full, actually. I never feel full because I don't like being full. I do satisfied, which is the contentment area, solar plexus and stomach area. Just feeling nice, not going over the top with it, not eating more than I need. That's the way I've changed my eating habits for many, many years. But if you can do something where you start really connecting with the kind of things that you put in your body and enjoying them and not feeling guilty for it, that will make a massive, massive difference. I promise it will make a massive, massive difference. I think that we've got lost. If you look at the 1960s and you look at the 1970s, we see the transition. So there are a few things that changed. Yes, I do sound like a geek on this subject area because it is an area where I have worked a lot, and it's an area where I've academically done quite a lot. But the reason I'm saying it is because I think a lot of us struggle. Like, obesity rates in the UK are just skyrocketing, and it's not because people, like I said, are going out of their way to put on weight. I've worked with people who literally had a bowl of cereal in the morning, a sandwich from a shop in the dinner time with a bag of crisps and a microwave meal for the meal at home in the evening, and they were putting on a lot of weight, right? That was all they were eating. That was because of the processed impact, the chemicals that were going in the body when they were doing it. They were just causing havoc. Like, I would not be able to cope just eating what they were eating. That's just not a lot of food at all. And my job was to help them understand that when you eat non-processed food, you know, you can really enjoy it and you can have a lot more than you'd imagine, and it'd be variety-based and tasty and wholesome and delicious and satisfying and lose weight. Because it's not about weight, it's about health. That's the whole premise of that. So I think it's really powerful to rethink food. And like I said, look at the 50s and 60s. Everyone was pretty tiny. I know that we'd come out of the war, I get all of that stuff, but even before that, people were very slim. Why? Well, it's because we didn't have all the chemicals in our food. Why? Well, it was because at the end of the day, we didn't have loads of processed, simple, easy to eat foods that actually aren't that great for us. That's why. We also didn't tell people that fat was bad. You know, fat isn't bad. Eating butter and cheese, you know, if you eat non-plant-based diet, if you just eat whatever, biggest lie is to tell people that have the low-fat yogurt. No, don't. Have the fat yogurt. Have the fat butter. Don't go any for this half-fat stuff. Eat it. Why? Because it actually helps to fill and satiate you. I'm going to stop going on now because I'll literally bore myself. I'll be like, I'm going to make everyone go and get chocolate now. That's how bored they are. If you've got a boring feeling, be like, sit with this feeling for a while. Right, guys, I will see you again next week. If any of you are coming on Wednesday to my crime premiere, I will see you then in the live chat. Oh, no, I won't. I'm lying. I won't this week because I'm in Birmingham. Wolverhampton on stage, so I apologise in advance for the fact that I won't be there on Wednesday. It's a good job that I got a personal secretary to help me with those things. Hope it's been useful, chaps. Much love. Oh, by the way, sorry, I've just got to say this. Right. If I offend anyone, I'm sorry. But if I do, you need to work on your resilience, is what I'm going to say. So the other day, I exposed myself to probably one of the most depressing videos I've ever heard, where a woman was giving a lecture on why saying hi guys is supporting the patriarchy. Yeah, apparently going into a room and being like, hi guys, is now supporting the male-dominated patriarchy. Yeah. We've got to that stage in life now where people care about that microscopic detail. So I just said chaps and I was like, hi chaps. And I was like, oh, I'm apparently supporting the patriarchy. I'm not even going to go into it. But you know when people are like, we're in a real male patriarchal like society, and I get it. I appreciate that clearly levels of violence towards women are much more directed by men. I get all of that. But as far as the patriarchy and men doing really well, like way more men are in prison, way more men are in the streets, way more men are unemployed, way more men have lower wages, way more men end up in the systems of, you know, the support systems such as the dole, way more men kill themselves. I just think, stop saying that using things like guys and chaps is bad for us. Like, on a scale of 1 to who cares? That's right at that extreme. I digress again, but where would it be without my little twists and turns of my mental health and mental exploration? I'll see you on Sunday if you come into my crime one then. I won't see you on Wednesday unless you come into Wolverhampton, in which case I'll see you then. Take care, be safe guys.